Sarah Martinez had always been different from her colleagues at the aerospace defense contractor. While other engineers wore press suits and carried themselves with corporate confidence, she preferred comfortable jeans and spoke in simple, direct terms that sometimes made the executives uncomfortable. Her workspace looked like organized chaos, with technical manuals stacked beside coffee-stained notebooks and prototype components scattered across multiple tables. The Griffin HX-9 project had been her baby for 3 years. This wasn't just another military aircraft. It was supposed to be the most advanced stealth reconnaissance drone ever built, capable of operating in hostile territories where human pilots couldn't survive. Sarah had poured countless late nights into perfecting its navigation systems, working through problems that made other engineers shake their heads and walk away. But the company's leadership had lost faith in both Sarah and her project. During the monthly board meetings, she would present her progress reports to a room full of skeptical faces. The executives would exchange glances when she spoke, their expressions ranging from barely concealed impatience to outright dismissal. Her direct supervisor, Marcus Webb, had made his position clear during their last performance review. "Sarah, you're a capable engineer, but this project is becoming a money pit," he had said, not even looking up from his paperwork. "The Griffin HX-9 has been in development for years with no tangible results. The military is asking questions we can't answer." The other project teams had started calling it Sarah's white elephant. During coffee breaks, she would overhear conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached. Her colleagues would discuss their successful launches and contract renewals while she sat alone, knowing that her project was seen as the department's biggest failure. The worst part wasn't the professional isolation. It was watching her life's work being slowly dismantled. Budget cuts had already eliminated 2 of her team members. The remaining engineers were reassigned to more viable projects, leaving Sarah to continue her work essentially alone. The company had moved her to a smaller lab space in the basement, away from the main engineering floor where successful projects received proper resources and attention. Military liaison officers who visited the facility would politely tour her workspace, nod at her explanations, and then spend the rest of their time discussing other projects with Marcus and the senior staff. Sarah knew they were just being courteous. Nobody really believed the Griffin HX-9 would ever see real deployment. Her family didn't understand the pressure she was under. During weekend dinners, her sister would ask why she didn't just find a new job, somewhere that would appreciate her skills. Her parents worried about her working such long hours on something that seemed to bring her nothing but stress and disappointment. Sarah's personal life had suffered too. Her relationship with David had ended 6 months earlier, when he finally grew tired of competing with her work for attention. "You care more about that machine than you do about us," he had said before packing his belongings. She wanted to argue, but the truth was that the Griffin HX-9 had become more than just a job. It was proof that her unconventional approach to engineering could work. Every morning, Sarah would arrive at the nearly empty lab and continue her work, despite the mounting pressure. She refused to give up because she knew something others didn't. The Griffin HX-9 was actually working. The recent test flights had shown remarkable improvements in stealth capabilities and navigation accuracy. But without witnesses or official documentation of these successes, her claims fell on deaf ears. The company's quarterly review was approaching, and Sarah knew it would likely be her last chance. Marcus had already hinted that if the Griffin HX-9 didn't show significant progress soon, the project would be officially terminated. 3 years of research, development, and sacrifice would be reduced to a footnote in someone else's success story. As Sarah worked late into another evening, adjusting the final calibrations on her prototype, she had no way of knowing that her moment of vindication was about to arrive in the most unexpected way possible. The phone call that would change everything was still days away, but the groundwork for her triumph was already being laid in a conflict zone thousands of miles from her quiet basement laboratory. General Patricia Hendricks had built her military career on making impossible decisions under extreme pressure. At 52, she commanded respect from soldiers half her age and had earned her position through decades of service in some of the world's most dangerous regions. Her current assignment in Eastern Europe had started as a routine peacekeeping mission, but recent intelligence reports suggested something far more serious was developing. The region had become increasingly unstable over the past months. What began as minor territorial disputes had escalated into something resembling the early stages of a larger conflict. General Hendricks found herself managing a delicate situation where traditional military responses could trigger an international incident, but ignoring the growing threats could put thousands of civilian lives at risk. Her intelligence team had been tracking unusual military movements across the border. Satellite imagery showed the construction of what appeared to be missile installations, but the images were unclear and taken from such distances that military analysts couldn't provide definitive assessments. Traditional reconnaissance flights were impossible. The airspace was heavily monitored, and sending manned aircraft would be considered an act of aggression. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, her chief intelligence officer, had been pushing for more aggressive surveillance methods. "General, we need eyes on those installations," he argued during their morning briefing. "If they're building what we think they're building, we have a narrow window to respond before they become operational." But General Hendricks understood the political complexities better than most of her staff. Any overt military action would escalate tensions beyond the point of diplomatic resolution. She needed information without triggering a larger conflict, and conventional military assets weren't designed for such delicate operations. The situation became more urgent when local informants reported increased activity around the suspected missile sites. Civilians in nearby villages had been evacuated under the guise of military exercises, but the pattern suggested preparation for something more significant. General Hendricks knew she was running out of time to gather the intelligence needed to make informed decisions about protecting both her forces and the civilian population. Her communications with military command back home had become increasingly tense. The Pentagon wanted actionable intelligence, but they also wanted plausible deniability. The political leadership couldn't afford to be caught conducting unauthorized surveillance operations. Yet they needed to know what threats they were facing. During a secure video conference with her superiors, General Hendricks explained her dilemma with characteristic directness. "We're operating blind in a situation that requires perfect vision," she reported. "Traditional surveillance methods either provide insufficient detail or carry unacceptable risks of detection." The response from Washington was predictably unhelpful. Gather the intelligence needed while maintaining complete operational security. It was the kind of impossible mandate that military leaders received when politicians wanted results without responsibility. General Hendricks had been exploring every available option. Her technical advisors had suggested various approaches, from high-altitude surveillance balloons to experimental satellite configurations, but each proposal carried significant limitations. The balloons were vulnerable to detection in weather conditions, while satellite imagery remained too distant to provide the detailed information needed for tactical planning. Her most experienced intelligence officers had begun suggesting that the mission might simply be impossible with current resources. The targets were too well defended for traditional reconnaissance, too politically sensitive for overt surveillance, and too important to ignore. It was exactly the kind of strategic puzzle that had defined General Hendricks' career, but this time the stakes felt higher than ever. As she reviewed the latest intelligence reports in her command post, General Hendricks couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something crucial. Her years of military experience told her that unconventional problems often required unconventional solutions, but the obvious answers all carried unacceptable risks. The breakthrough would come from an unexpected source. Deep in the Pentagon's procurement databases, a junior analyst had been researching experimental military technologies that might provide alternative surveillance capabilities. Most of the projects he reviewed were either too theoretical or too expensive for practical deployment. But one particular file caught his attention. The Griffin HX-9 project had been buried in bureaucratic paperwork for months, dismissed by most military reviewers as another over-engineered solution to problems that didn't need solving. But as the analyst read through the technical specifications, he realized that this forgotten drone project might be exactly what General Hendricks needed for her impossible mission. The phone call that would connect Sarah's struggling project to General Hendricks' urgent operational needs was already being prepared. Neither woman knew that their professional destinies were about to intersect in a way that would validate years of persistence and prove that sometimes the most ridiculed ideas become the most valuable solutions. The call came on a Tuesday morning when Sarah was running diagnostics on the Griffin HX-9's navigation system. She had been working since dawn, trying to optimize the drone's stealth capabilities while simultaneously preparing her final presentation for the quarterly review. The lab phone rarely rang anymore. Most people communicated with her through email or simply avoided contact altogether. "Sarah Martinez speaking," she answered, expecting another routine inquiry about project documentation. "Ms. Martinez, this is Colonel Patricia Williams from Pentagon Procurement." The voice was crisp and professional. "I need to discuss your Griffin HX-9 project. How quickly can you have a working prototype ready for field deployment?" Sarah nearly dropped her coffee. Field deployment hadn't been mentioned in connection with her project for over a year. The Pentagon had seemed to forget the Griffin HX-9 existed, and now they were asking about immediate operational readiness. "Colonel, I appreciate the inquiry, but I should probably connect you with my supervisor, Marcus Webb," Sarah replied cautiously. Years of corporate politics had taught her to be careful about direct military contact. "Ms. Martinez, I've already spoken with Mr. Webb and your company's executive team," Colonel Williams continued. "They've given us your technical specifications, but frankly, they couldn't answer our operational questions. We need to speak with the engineer who actually built this system." The conversation that followed changed everything. Colonel Williams explained that they had an urgent reconnaissance requirement in a highly sensitive operational environment. Traditional surveillance methods were inadequate, and the Griffin HX-9's unique combination of stealth technology and extended operational range made it their only viable option. Sarah found herself describing capabilities she had never been allowed to demonstrate properly. The Griffin HX-9 could operate completely autonomously for up to 18 hours, navigate through electronic countermeasures that would disable conventional drones, and capture intelligence with resolution levels that exceeded most satellite systems. More importantly, it could do all of this while remaining virtually undetectable to enemy radar systems. "Ms. Martinez, we need this drone operational within 72 hours, Colonel Williams stated bluntly. "Is that possible?" Sarah's mind raced through the technical checklist. The prototype was functional, but it had never undergone the rigorous testing protocols that military deployment typically required. However, all her recent trials had shown exceptional performance across every measured parameter. "Colonel, the system is ready, but my company hasn't approved military deployment," Sarah responded honestly. "I would need authorization from our executive team." Within 2 hours, Sarah's previously dismissive supervisors were suddenly very interested in the Griffin HX-9 project. Marcus Webb, who had spent months trying to terminate her work, was now asking detailed questions about deployment timelines and production capabilities. The same executives who had reduced her budget and relocated her to the basement were suddenly scheduling emergency meetings to discuss the project's strategic importance. The transformation was surreal. Sarah watched her colleagues' attitudes shift from barely concealed contempt to eager cooperation as news of the Pentagon's interest spread through the company. Engineers who had avoided her project were now volunteering to assist with deployment preparations. The executive team was suddenly describing the Griffin HX-9 as one of their most promising military contracts. But Sarah realized that their support was still conditional. They were excited about the potential profits and military connections, not about the technology itself. If this deployment failed, they would distance themselves from the project faster than they had embraced it. The pressure was enormous, not just to succeed, but to succeed perfectly on the first attempt. The technical challenges of preparing for immediate deployment were significant. While the Griffin HX-9 had performed well in controlled test environments, real-world military operations would stress every system in ways that laboratory conditions couldn't replicate. Sarah spent the next 2 days working almost continuously, fine-tuning calibrations and running diagnostic checks on every component. Her biggest concern wasn't mechanical failure, it was whether the military operators would understand the Griffin HX-9's unique capabilities well enough to utilize them effectively. The drone's advanced systems required a different approach to reconnaissance missions than conventional military aircraft. Operators needed to think in terms of extended autonomous operations rather than direct real-time control. Sarah created detailed operational manuals and began coordinating with military technical teams who would be responsible for the deployment. These conversations revealed the critical nature of the mission, though specific details remained classified. She understood that the Griffin HX-9 would be operating in an environment where failure could have serious consequences, beyond just her project's future. The irony wasn't lost on her. For 3 years, she had been trying to convince her own company that the Griffin HX-9 had military value. Now, with less than a week's notice, she was being asked to prove that conviction under the most demanding circumstances possible. As Sarah packed the Griffin HX-9 for transport to its deployment location, she reflected on how quickly her professional situation had changed. The same colleagues who had made jokes about her white elephant were now treating her with newfound respect. But she knew that respect was fragile. It depended entirely on the success of a mission she wouldn't even be allowed to directly monitor. General Hendricks first saw the Griffin HX-9 when it arrived at the forward operating base in 3 unmarked transport containers. The drone was smaller than she had expected, roughly the size of a large motorcycle, but its sleek angular design suggested sophisticated engineering. Sarah Martinez had accompanied the equipment, her casual civilian clothes contrasting sharply with the military precision surrounding them. The briefing session revealed capabilities that exceeded General Hendricks's most optimistic expectations. Sarah explained the Griffin HX-9 systems with quiet confidence, describing technical specifications that addressed every challenge the reconnaissance mission presented. The drone could maintain silent operation for over 15 hours, navigate autonomously through electronic jamming, and capture high-resolution intelligence from distances that kept it beyond enemy detection ranges. The key advantage is adaptive stealth, Sarah explained to the assembled military personnel. The Griffin HX-9 doesn't just avoid radar. It actively analyzes enemy detection systems and modifies its signature to remain invisible. Conventional stealth technology is passive, but this system responds dynamically to threats. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, who had been skeptical about civilian contractors, found himself impressed by Sarah's straightforward explanations. She avoided technical jargon and focused on operational capabilities, demonstrating a practical understanding of military requirements that many defense contractors lacked. The first test flight took place at dawn, with Sarah operating the Griffin HX-9 from a mobile command unit while military observers monitored its performance. The drone's takeoff was nearly silent, and within minutes it had disappeared from both visual and radar tracking. For the next 6 hours, it conducted simulated reconnaissance over friendly territory, capturing detailed imagery while remaining completely undetected by the base's own defense systems. General Hendricks watched the live intelligence feed with growing amazement. The Griffin HX-9 was providing clearer, more detailed surveillance data than any system she had previously used. The drone could zoom in on individual vehicle license plates from altitudes that made it invisible to ground observers, while simultaneously mapping entire facility layouts with precision that rivaled architectural drawings. "Ms. Martinez, this is exactly what we need," General Hendricks said after reviewing the test results. "When can we deploy for the actual mission?" Sarah's response was characteristically direct. "General, the system is ready now, but I want to be clear about limitations. This is still a prototype. I've tested every component extensively, but real combat conditions always present unexpected challenges." The honesty impressed General Hendricks, who had dealt with too many contractors who overpromised and underdelivered. Sarah's willingness to acknowledge potential problems while confidently presenting her system's capabilities suggested both technical competence and personal integrity. Preparations for the actual reconnaissance mission began immediately. The target area was a heavily defended installation located in disputed territory where traditional surveillance methods had failed. Intelligence analysts needed detailed information about missile placements, personnel numbers, and defensive capabilities, but previous attempts to gather this information had either failed completely or provided inadequate data. Sarah worked closely with military technicians to optimize the Griffin HX-9's configuration for this specific mission. The drone would need to penetrate sophisticated air defense systems, navigate through mountainous terrain that complicated radio communications, and operate autonomously for nearly the maximum extent of its capabilities. The mission planning sessions revealed the full complexity of what General Hendricks was attempting. Political restrictions prevented the use of conventional military assets, while the urgency of the intelligence requirement meant that failure could result in either military casualties or strategic disadvantage. The Griffin HX-9 represented their only viable option for obtaining the information needed to make informed decisions. As Sarah fine-tuned the final mission parameters, she began to understand the broader implications of her work. This wasn't just about proving the value of her engineering project. It was about providing military commanders with intelligence that could prevent a larger conflict. The technical success or failure of the Griffin HX-9 would directly impact the safety of military personnel and civilian populations. The night before the mission launch, General Hendricks spoke privately with Sarah about the risks involved. "Ms. Martinez, I want you to understand that if this mission fails, it's not a reflection on your work," she said. "We're asking your system to perform under conditions that would challenge any technology." Sarah appreciated the general's consideration, but she also knew that professional reputations weren't built on good intentions. The Griffin HX-9 would either succeed or fail based on her engineering decisions, and the consequences would extend far beyond her personal career. She spent the final hours before launch conducting last-minute system checks, knowing that once the drone crossed into hostile territory, she would have no ability to make corrections or adjustments. The launch was scheduled for pre-dawn hours when atmospheric conditions would provide optimal stealth performance. As Sarah prepared the Griffin HX-9 for what might be the most important mission of her career, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her from corporate ridicule to military confidence in just a few short days. The Griffin HX-9 disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness at exactly 0347 hours. Its nearly silent departure marking the beginning of the most critical test of Sarah's engineering career. She monitored the drone's progress from the mobile command center, watching data streams that showed flight path, system status, and the gradual approach toward hostile territory. For the first hour, everything proceeded perfectly. The Griffin HX-9 maintained optimal altitude and speed, while its stealth systems adapted continuously to potential detection threats. Sarah watched the drone navigate through increasingly complex terrain, automatically adjusting its flight path to avoid radar installations, while maintaining direct course toward the primary reconnaissance target. General Hendricks stood behind Sarah's workstation, observing the mission progress with the focused attention that had defined her military career. The intelligence data streaming from the Griffin HX-9 was already providing insights that conventional surveillance methods had failed to deliver. The drone's advanced sensors were mapping defensive installations with remarkable precision, revealing details that would be crucial for future strategic planning. "Ms. Martinez, your system is exceeding our most optimistic projections," General Hendricks commented quietly. "The intelligence we're gathering is more comprehensive than anything we've obtained through traditional methods." But Sarah remained focused on the technical challenges ahead. The Griffin HX-9 was approaching the most heavily defended section of its flight path, where multiple radar systems and electronic warfare capabilities created a detection environment that would challenge every aspect of the drone's stealth technology. At 0512 hours, the first serious threat emerged. Enemy radar systems began actively scanning the Griffin HX-9's operational area with intensities that exceeded the parameters Sarah had used for testing. She watched her screens anxiously as the drone's adaptive stealth systems analyzed the detection threats and automatically modified their countermeasures. The Griffin HX-9's response was exactly what Sarah had designed it to do, but seeing it work under actual combat conditions was profoundly different from laboratory testing. The drone identified 17 separate radar signatures, classified them by threat level, and implemented specific stealth modifications for each system simultaneously. It was performing precisely as intended, but Sarah knew that even minor technical failures could be catastrophic under these conditions. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, monitoring communications intercepts, reported increased enemy activity in response to something they couldn't identify. "They know something's in their airspace, but they can't locate it," he announced. "Their radar operators are running full-spectrum scans, but they're not getting any solid contacts." The Griffin HX-9 continued its mission, capturing high-resolution imagery of the target installation, while enemy forces searched frantically for an intruder they couldn't detect. Sarah watched the drone document missile placements, personnel movements, and defensive configurations with detail that would provide military analysts with comprehensive intelligence about enemy capabilities. At 0634 hours, The most dangerous phase of the mission began. The Griffin HX-9 needed to conduct close-range reconnaissance of the installation's central command facility, requiring it to operate within direct visual range of ground observers while maintaining electronic invisibility. This was the operational scenario that had worried Sarah most during mission planning. The drone performed flawlessly, using terrain masking and adaptive camouflage to remain undetected, while gathering intelligence that revealed the true scope of the enemy installation. The facility was significantly larger and more sophisticated than previous estimates had suggested, with defensive capabilities that would have made conventional military operations extremely costly. As the Griffin HX-9 completed its primary reconnaissance objectives and began the return journey, Sarah allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic. The drone had successfully penetrated some of the most sophisticated defensive systems in the world, while gathering intelligence that would be invaluable for strategic planning. But the mission wouldn't be complete until the Griffin HX-9 returned safely. With its precious cargo of information, the return flight presented new challenges as enemy forces had activated additional detection systems in response to their awareness of unauthorized intrusion. The Griffin HX-9 needed to navigate through an even more dangerous electronic environment while carrying the weight of its intelligence. Payload Sarah monitored every system parameter as the drone made its way back toward friendly territory. Each successful mile covered brought them closer to mission completion, but also represented another opportunity for technical failure or enemy detection. The Griffin HX-9's autonomous systems continued performing perfectly, but Sarah knew that mechanical systems could fail without warning, regardless of their design reliability. General Hendricks remained in the command center throughout the return flight, understanding that the mission's success would depend on the Griffin HX-9's ability to deliver its intelligence data back to military analysts. The reconnaissance information was valuable only if it could be processed and acted upon, making the final phase of the mission as critical as the initial penetration of enemy territory. As the Griffin HX-9 approached friendly airspace, Sarah began preparing for the delicate process of recovery and data extraction, knowing that technical problems during landing could still jeopardize the entire mission despite hours of perfect performance. The Griffin HX-9 touched down at the forward operating base at 11:27 hours after completing a flawless 8-hour mission that had exceeded every performance expectation. Sarah felt overwhelming relief as she watched the drone taxi to its designated recovery area, its precious intelligence payload intact after successfully penetrating and escaping from one of the world's most sophisticated defense networks. General Hendricks was the first to congratulate Sarah as she completed the post-flight system checks. "Ms. Martinez, what your system accomplished today was nothing short of extraordinary," the general said with genuine admiration. "The Griffin HX-9 has provided us with intelligence that will fundamentally change our understanding of the strategic situation." The intelligence analysis that followed revealed the true magnitude of Sarah's achievement. The Griffin HX-9 had documented a military installation that was far more advanced and threatening than anyone had realized. The detailed reconnaissance data showed missile systems capable of reaching targets hundreds of miles beyond previous estimates, along with defensive capabilities that would have made conventional surveillance missions suicidal. Military intelligence analysts worked through the afternoon processing the vast amount of data the Griffin HX-9 had collected. High-resolution imagery revealed not just the location and configuration of enemy assets, but also operational patterns and vulnerabilities that would be crucial for future strategic planning. The information was so comprehensive that it would influence military decision-making for months to come. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, who had initially been skeptical about civilian contractors, sought out Sarah to personally acknowledge what she had accomplished. "Ms. Martinez, I owe you an apology," he said straightforwardly. "I didn't think any civilian technology could perform in this environment. Your system didn't just meet our requirements, it exceeded them in ways we didn't know were possible." The successful mission triggered immediate changes in how military leadership viewed both Sarah and the Griffin HX-9 project. General Hendricks initiated procurement discussions for additional systems, while Pentagon officials began inquiring about production timelines and expanded capabilities. Sarah found herself at the center of strategic conversations that would shape future military operations. But the most satisfying moment came when Sarah received a secure phone call from her company's executive team. Marcus Webb, who had spent months trying to terminate the Griffin HX-9 project, was now eager to discuss expansion plans and additional military contracts. The same executives who had ridiculed her work were suddenly treating her as their most valuable engineer. "Sarah, we always knew the Griffin HX-9 had tremendous potential," Marcus said during their video conference, apparently forgetting his previous attempts to kill the project. "The company is ready to provide whatever resources you need to develop additional systems." Sarah responded with characteristic directness. "Marcus, 6 months ago you moved me to the basement and cut my project funding. Now you're offering unlimited resources because the military wants to buy what I built, despite your objections." The conversation that followed established Sarah's new position within the company. She would lead an expanded Griffin HX development program with complete technical authority and substantial budget increases. More importantly, she would report directly to the executive team rather than through supervisors who had never understood or supported her work. General Hendricks requested that Sarah remain at the forward operating base for additional mission planning as military commanders recognized the strategic advantages the Griffin HX-9 provided. The drone's success had opened possibilities for reconnaissance operations that were previously impossible, allowing military forces to gather intelligence without the political complications of conventional surveillance methods. The technical success of the Griffin HX-9 also vindicated Sarah's unconventional engineering approach. Her emphasis on adaptive systems rather than fixed capabilities had proven crucial for operating in dynamic threat environments. While traditional military systems were designed for specific scenarios, the Griffin HX-9 could modify its behavior in real time to address unexpected challenges. Sarah spent the following days working with military planners to optimize Griffin HX-9 configurations for different operational requirements. Each mission would present unique challenges, and the drone's adaptive capabilities needed to be fine-tuned for specific threat environments and intelligence objectives. The validation she felt went beyond professional recognition. For 3 years, Sarah had believed in the Griffin HX-9's potential despite widespread skepticism and institutional resistance. The successful mission proved that persistence and technical integrity could overcome corporate politics and bureaucratic obstacles. As news of the Griffin HX-9's success spread through military and defense contractor networks, Sarah began receiving job offers from competing companies eager to recruit the engineer who had developed such revolutionary capabilities. But she had no interest in leaving her current position now that her work was finally receiving the support and recognition it deserved. The mission that had begun as a desperate attempt to gather critical intelligence had become a demonstration of how individual determination and technical excellence could produce results that transformed strategic thinking. General Hendricks had found the solution to her impossible reconnaissance requirements, while Sarah had proven that innovative engineering could succeed even in the face of institutional doubt and corporate indifference. 2 years after the Griffin HX-9's first successful mission, Sarah Martinez stood before a packed auditorium at the National Defense Technology Summit, preparing to deliver the keynote address about revolutionary aerospace engineering. The woman, who had once worked in isolation in a basement laboratory, was now recognized as one of the military's most innovative contractors, leading a team of 50 engineers developing next-generation reconnaissance systems. The transformation in Sarah's professional life had been remarkable, but it was the broader impact of her work that provided the greatest satisfaction. The Griffin HX series had evolved into a comprehensive family of reconnaissance drones, each optimized for specific military applications. These systems had been deployed successfully in dozens of operations, providing military commanders with intelligence capabilities that were reshaping strategic thinking across multiple branches of service. General Hendricks, now promoted to command a joint intelligence division, had become one of Sarah's strongest advocates within military leadership. Their professional relationship had evolved into a partnership that consistently produced innovative solutions to complex reconnaissance challenges. The general frequently consulted with Sarah's team when developing operational requirements for new intelligence-gathering missions. The success of the Griffin HX program had also changed the culture within Sarah's company. Her direct, results-oriented approach to engineering had influenced how the organization evaluated and supported research projects. Executives who had once dismissed unconventional ideas were now more willing to invest in experimental technologies that showed long-term potential rather than guaranteed short-term profits. Marcus Webb, Sarah's former supervisor, had been reassigned to a different division after the company's leadership recognized that his management approach had nearly cost them their most valuable military contract. The basement laboratory where Sarah had worked in isolation had been converted into a modern research facility, while her original workspace had become a conference room named in honor of the Griffin HX project. Sarah's personal life had also improved dramatically. The professional recognition and financial success that came with the Griffin HX program had given her the confidence to pursue relationships and interests that had been neglected during her years of struggling to prove her engineering capabilities. She had reconnected with David, who had been impressed by her persistence and eventual success, though their relationship had evolved into a strong friendship rather than romance. The technical challenges that had driven Sarah to develop the Griffin HX9 had also led to breakthrough innovations in civilian applications. The adaptive stealth technology originally designed for military reconnaissance had been modified for commercial drone systems used in environmental monitoring, search and rescue operations, and infrastructure inspection. These civilian applications were generating additional revenue streams while contributing to public safety and environmental protection. During her keynote presentation, Sarah reflected on the lessons learned from her journey from corporate ridicule to military recognition. Innovation requires persistence in the face of skepticism, she told the audience of engineers and military officials. The most transformative technologies often emerge from projects that others consider impossible or impractical. She emphasized the importance of maintaining technical integrity, even when facing institutional pressure to compromise or abandon difficult projects. The Griffin HX9's success had demonstrated that thorough engineering and patient development could produce results that exceeded the performance of systems developed through conventional approaches with larger budgets and more institutional support. The audience included young engineers facing similar challenges to those Sarah had encountered early in her career. She encouraged them to maintain confidence in their technical judgment while remaining open to feedback and collaboration. The key was distinguishing between legitimate technical criticism and bureaucratic resistance based on risk aversion or personal politics. After her presentation, Sarah was approached by General Hendricks, who had a new reconnaissance challenge that would require pushing the Griffin HX technology beyond its current capabilities. The military needed intelligence-gathering systems that could operate in space-based environments, presenting technical challenges that would require another leap in engineering innovation. Sarah accepted the challenge with the same quiet confidence that had carried her through the original Griffin HX9 development. She had learned that the most rewarding engineering problems were those that others considered unsolvable, and that persistence combined with technical excellence could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The basement laboratory where Sarah had once worked alone had been replaced by a state-of-the-art research facility, but she still maintained a small personal workspace where she could focus on the most challenging technical problems without distractions. It was in this quiet environment that she would begin developing the solutions that would define the next phase of her career. Looking back on her journey from ridicule to recognition, Sarah understood that the Griffin HX9's success had been about more than just proving her engineering capabilities. It had demonstrated the value of supporting unconventional approaches to difficult problems, and the importance of maintaining faith in innovative ideas even when they lacked institutional support. The story that had begun with Sarah working alone on a project that others considered a failure had evolved into a career defined by transformative engineering achievements and meaningful contributions to both military effectiveness and civilian safety. Her persistence in the face of skepticism had not only vindicated her technical approach, but had also inspired a new generation of engineers to pursue ambitious projects despite institutional resistance.